So I got this comment yesterday, and I figure it's a good opportunity for a quick little video. Nature of Reality wrote, "The key to winning in courts is not to use the right to travel argument, rather use the I was never engaged in transportation in the first place argument. Thank you, Eddie Craig, for that one." Alright, so let's look at how the not engaged in transportation argument works in the real world. First up, we have State v. Lozano from September 2018. It was charged with a couple things. One of those was operating a motor vehicle without two operable taillights, etc. So we can see here, down here. During the trial, he said that I was not using it as a vehicle to transport or carry persons or property for compensation. That was actually in my right of locomotion of liberty. I was in my liberty of right of locomotion at the time, and I was not using it as a motor vehicle. I was not engaged in transportation. He also argued he was not in commerce, blah, blah, blah. Moving on, the defendant testified that he began recording the officer because he was not engaged in transportation. Here is what the court responded. Here, because the defendant's claim is utterly without merit, he cannot establish that a clear and unequivocal rule of law was breached. Indeed, this court has repeatedly rejected claims like that raised by the defendant, and it cites a bunch of court cases, including State v. Boer. And if we go to State v. Boer, it's another right to travel or right to drive without a license case. And here's what the court said. This is a case from 1997. We agree that the appellant enjoys a fundamental right of freedom to travel. However, here's what the court said. The ability to drive a motor vehicle on a public highway is not a fundamental right. State and local governments possess an inherent power, i.e. police power, to enact reasonable legislation for the health, safety, welfare, morals, or convenience of the public. So in Tennessee, it does not work. This other guy in New York also tried the not engaged in transportation argument. This is from 2017. This guy was upset because a cop told him that he needed a valid driver's license to operate a motor vehicle on public roads. And here is the relevant section. Right to drive without a license. Plaintiff alleges that he was not engaged in transportation and in parentheses commerce, and that I had a God-given right to travel privately without a license. What the court responded is, plaintiff's allegations are frivolous and must be dismissed. Despite plaintiff's pages of protestations to the contrary, it is well established, it is well settled, that requiring individuals to possess a valid driver's license to operate a motor vehicle on public roads is indeed constitutional. Continuing, it is well settled that travelers do not have a constitutional right to the most convenient form of travel, and minor restrictions on that travel simply do not amount to the denial of a fundamental right. So 2017, New York saying that you are not engaged in transportation does not work. Finally, well, we could go on, but I'm only going to do 3 cases. Anyways, we got Leverson v. State. This is from Texas, 2016. Leverson was charged with 3 traffic offenses, driving without expired registration, no financial responsibility, and didn't show his driver's license. Here's the relevant part. In asserting that the court lacked personal jurisdiction, appellant claims that he was not engaged in any regulated activity governed by the regulatory code known as the Transportation Code because he was neither actively nor passively engaged in commerce or commercial activity, was not engaged in the movement of goods, property, passengers, or people for compensation or hire. He further asserts that because he was not engaged in transportation, as he interprets the term, he cannot be in violation of any provisions of the Transportation Code, including those those he was convicted of violating. Appellant confuses the concept of jurisdiction with evidentiary sufficiency. Further, his argument relies on his novel interpretation of the term transportation, as well as the terms vehicle, motor vehicle, driver, operator, and this state as used in the Transportation Code and his application. However, as the county court at law observed, the definition of transportation is irrelevant to the offenses with which the appellant was charged. Noting, see Perkins v. State, another Texas case, noting that the definition of transportation is relevant to the offense for which appellant was charged when rejecting appellant's claim that he could not be in violation of Texas Transportation Code because he was not engaged in activity constituting his definition of transportation. Appellant was not charged with being in transportation of his claim. He was charged with operating a motor vehicle on a public roadway with an expired registration, failing to display a driver's license, and failing to maintain financial responsibility. They also cite Jackson v. Virginia from 1979. The word transportation is not used in the statute, nor is being engaged in some activity deemed to be transportation an element of the offense. Contrary to appellant's petition, the title of the statutory code containing the offenses or a particular word used in it is not imported into the statutory elements of the offenses therein described. They got to say it's well settled that driving an automobile on public roads is not a constitutionally protected right, but a privilege, and they cite all these cases. You can see here that this privilege is subject to reasonable regulation under state's police power in the interest of the welfare and safety of the general public. We probably use that word. Finally, appellant rejects the requirements, arguing that they do not apply to him because he was not involved in transportation. However, appellant's interpretation of transportation misapplies that term to the transportation code provisions at issue in these cases. In light of that misinterpretation and misapplication, we disagree that he was not required to comply with the statutes. Appellant was required to demonstrate compliance with the regulations. The requirement to demonstrate such compliance does not violate the Fifth Amendment. We overrule appellant's fourth issue. Finally, concluded, we affirm the judgment of the county court at law, which means that he lost. So it looks like people have been trying Eddie Craig's not engaged in transportation stuff arguments over the last couple of years, 2016, 2017, 2018, and lost every single time. So yes, Eddie Craig is selling you something that does not work.